And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are back to our last session. My name is Anita Erskine, and I'm joined here by my colleague Fatima Sharif, who is our French speaker.
Thank you very much, Anita. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us for this final lap of the Mjadala Africa Leadership Debate of the African Union. You have listened during the debate, the questions that were raised, the answers that were given by the different candidates, and we're coming to the end of the debate. And so, Anita, we're going to listen to the closing remarks to the candidates. So thank you very much, Fatima.
Candidates, you each have 2 minutes to share your closing remarks, or better still, your last words. We will start this round with His Excellency Raila Odinga.
Thank you. I am delighted to have the opportunity to address our people of Africa. And as I've said, I am ready to work for Africa. There are reforms that will be necessary so that AU can work more effectively. One of these reforms will be financial reforms, so that we are able to bring in the African private sector into the funding. I mentioned also the issue of sovereign funds that we can use. We can create a fund that will enable AU to do all its money work. Then there's issue of 0.2% of the duty, which only 17 countries are remitting. I will work to ensure that all the countries actually pay their dues to the Union. This is what happens in the European Union, and that's why European Union is able to even fund African Union. It's a shame. We can be able to fund this organization out of our own resources on the continent. And this is what I'm going to try to do. And I said that I am ready on day one when I'm appointed. I will not need any kind of induction. I'm ready to work for the continent. And I will offer my best. The days of Africa have come. The African lion will begin to roar and tell its Asian tiger counterpart and the European bear and the American jaguar that this is going to be Africa's millennium. 2000.
Dear candidate, I'm really sorry to interrupt you once again, but these are the rules of the debate. Nous allons maintenant, mesdames et
we are going now, ladies and gentlemen, give 2 minutes to the candidate of Djibouti closing remarks.
Thank you so much, and let me speak in Arabic. I would like to say that if I will be elected as the chair of the African Union Commission, I will be up to your aspirations, and I will defend the interest of our continent, and I will work diligently to defend our continent, and with the full modesty, I think that I deserve it.
Je souhaite à nos pays, à nos peuples africains.
So I wish for our African people, our countries, a very happy 2025.
Tonight, I wish to all African nations and citizens all the best. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now 2 minutes for you, His Excellency Richard J. Randemandrato.
En 2025,
in 2025, there will be a new team that will be leading for 4 years. They will be leading the African Union Commission for 4 years, and there shall be 8 high-level public servants like most of us, and we shall be the ones to continue with the reforms. We shall be a united team, a team that will have the team spirit to continue in the implementation of the 10-year plan of Agenda 2063. I do regret that this evening we're not able to handle subjects that are so urgent because we did not have enough time. Issues such as public health, the debt, issues of financing and financial institutions of the African Union, questions that have to do with the participation of the civil society and the diaspora, the questions that are linked to information and digital technology. I'm sorry we did not have time to deal with those issues, but on another we shall have other opportunities and I shall be able to make my modest contribution. Like in public sport, there have to be players and there have to be those who choose or who select the players. Those who select the heads of state. It is up to them to select the team that will lead the African Union Commission for their need. We need a leader. Men and women need a leader, and I hope that in 2025 the wisdom of heads of state and government will balance the team that will win, so that the Africa that we want can continue to win the battle for sustainable development. Thank you. Thank you very much for these closing remarks that have been made by the different candidates.
Candidates, ladies and gentlemen, please, another round of applause for our esteemed candidates. Tonight, we have heard from His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, Foreign Affairs Minister Djibouti. We've also heard from His Excellency Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister of Kenya. We've also heard from His Excellency Richard J. Randyamandrato, who is the former Foreign Affairs Minister of Madagascar. Each one of our candidates has done an exceptional job talking about the thematic areas that were set before them. We've talked about advancing economic integration. We've talked about promoting peace and security as well as democracy, Africa's place in global affairs, and reforming the African Union, amongst many. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute honor bringing you Mjadala Africa Leadership Debate 2024.
Merci infiniment.
Thank you very much, Anita. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the Mjadala Leadership Debate, direct streamed line from the headquarters of the African Union in Addis Ababa. We were delighted to have you with us for the moderation of this debate. Of course, we wish the different candidates all the very best. The election of the new chairperson will take place at the level of the African Union Commission. It will take place in February next year, and thank you to all of you for having been with us, and have a good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen,
going to have a single currency in Africa? Why not? That is possible.
Daughter Excellency Randyamandrato, it's your turn, sir. 4 minutes.
Je ne pense pas.
Well, I do not think that Pan-Africanism is actually dying out. No, because Pan-Africanism is in us. We are Pan-Africanists. You cannot erase the history of this continent, the history which also includes the efforts of our diaspora. So Pan-Africanism is really not dying in Africa. It is true that we all have a huge responsibility. The current generation that we have to work to make sure that the future generation should not forget what our founding fathers actually had in mind when they were establishing the OAU. so that all those who are in Africa should continue to live the same dream the same dream. We inherited this continent from our founding fathers, and we have the Africa that we want. The Africa that we see is the Africa where we live in, and the Africa that we want is the Africa that we want to prepare, and which we must prepare. And so there is a clear difference between the Africa in which we are and the African Union, which is our own home, the common house. And if the African Union Commission does not put in the right resources, the human resources and the financial resources, even the diplomats and the military, we will not get to where we want to be. And so I am of the opinion that it all depends on the will of the people to go beyond the challenges that we face today. We all know the problems of our African Union today. There are certain aspects that do not meet the expectations of the people. For example, the SACA audit that was prepared by experts proposing reforms that have to be undertaken. We also have reforms that were undertaken in 2016. So we need to undertake those reforms to ensure that the African Union can actually rise to the challenges. The regional economic communities also have a role to play. I went to COMESA for several years and actually saw the efforts undertaken by countries of COMESA and East Africa, and we see Tunisia, Egypt in COMESA as well, and this will continue. We have the Abuja Treaty actually defined gradual integration at the regional level and then continental level, and I know we will get there, and I am going to work with the members of the next commission so that together we can actually make all of this easy. And lastly, I think we should also bear in mind, we should also think about the military bases, the foreign military bases in Africa, in African countries. Some countries have already started to take their own destiny in their hands in terms of their security. We should be brave enough, we should actually have that courage to make sure that we can actually stand out there as adults that can actually take their destiny in their own hands. Foreign military bases in Africa, we do hope that in a few years' time, those military bases will be a thing of the past, because these military bases are actually a source of conflict. Thank you. Thank you very much, Excellency Randram Mandriato, candidate of Madagascar. Now we listen to Raila Odinga, candidate of Kenya.
Thank you. Well, I mentioned earlier on about the inter-African trade, which today stands just at 15%. Inter-European trade, on the other hand, stands at 70%. Inter-Asian trade stands at 60%. Africa trades more with the external world than with itself, wasting a lot of resources. Now, how did Europeans come from behind and leapfrog and overtake Africa? That is something that we need to ask ourselves. But here we need to now look forward to see how we can be able to make use of this huge domestic market that we have. We have a population of 1.4 billion people. And that is what has helped China. China did two things. One was to train the younger generation, the youth, so that they had a very highly skilled manpower. And when they liberalized their economy, the manufacturing unit in the West rushed to China. If you go to China, for example, take the automobile, the Ford, the Jeep, the BMW, the Mercedes, the Toyota, the Nissan, they're all there in China. And because there was cheap, highly skilled, cheap labor, secondly, cheap raw material. The raw materials which they were actually getting originally from Africa. And that is how China has managed to develop a 600 million people middle class. Africa can be able to fill the gap which is being left down there by China by actually coming together and opening up. So we need to come together as Africa and create an African market which will be able to attract investors to come to our continent. Africa is the youngest continent in terms of population. 70% of our population is below the age of 35. That is a big bonus. It can be a bonus or it can be a curse. If the youth are not empowered, given requisite knowledge and skills, they become a drag to society, drunkards, drug addicts, and criminals. But empowered, they become a real source for wealth creation. It is a pity today that many African youths drown in the Mediterranean trying to seek greener pastures in Europe because you have not created conditions that can retain them here. Now we are saying that we want to create a situation where every African youth must be connected to the internet, and using the artificial intelligence and information technology, we can be able to give this youth opportunity to work anywhere in the world when they're staying here on the continent. This is something that we are going to address, empowerment of the African youth, and together with the African woman, so that we create a workforce that will be helped in terms of wealth creation on the continent. This will enable Africa to leapfrog and to catch up with the rest of the world. I'm saying that I want to be a vehicle to be used to help Africa to get there. We will work together with all the leadership in the continent so that Africa moves.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, Your Excellency Raila Odinga, finishing us on the third round. And now we move into the fourth and final round, and I give my sister the opportunity to open the envelope and tell us what the first or the last question rather is. Ladies and gentlemen, as a form of excellency, the floor is yours.
Faire taire les armes et
silencing the guns and issues relating to peace and security in general actually are due to so many things. It's not like turning on a switch or switching it off, not on and off a switch. No, there are several factors that have to be taken into consideration, and that is the reason why the African continent and the African Union have been challenges to silence the guns. But we have to resolve our conflicts peacefully, and this is one of the principles of the African Union, just like the principle of non-interference. So this is an aspect that we all have to actually look at. When exactly do we talk about non-interference or non-indifference, and how do we use them to silence the guns? But that is the situation in which we find ourselves in. And if I am chosen by the heads of states and government as chairperson of the commission, I will make sure that the African Union Commission would actually work towards resolving our conflicts peacefully, because we have that in the Constitutive Act of Africa, of the African Union. So we have the Peace and Security Council, we have the Peace Architecture of the African Union, but we also have the United Nations Security Council. And then bilaterally, we've got efforts that are underway, and we've heard about progress in some areas, in some regions where we have long-standing conflicts. And then we also have the opportunity of ensuring that there is solidarity with the United Nations, the African Union and the United Nations. This is a framework that could actually enable us to sit down with the international community and talk about crisis in Africa. Why should we only talk about the crisis in Ukraine? Why not talk about the crisis in Sudan and crisis in other African countries? So we are talking about financing peace missions, but there is also a program that actually wants to see the program of the United Nations, that is the SDGs, aligned with Agenda 2063. And then we also have the 10-year plan of our public institutions in charge of working at a national level, but we are talking about the justice systems in our respective countries. Now, concerning the 2 permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council, I think here in Africa, we all know the importance and the urgency of having these 2 seats. And we have to seize this opportunity because we are actually at the end of 2024. And so we have to act very fast in 2025. And this should be the mantra of the African Union in 2025. And so, of course, we have to make sure that we can actually speak with one voice on the choice of who will represent Africa on the United Nations Security Council. It's not going to be easy. It will be up to the heads of states to decide who will be the continent's representative. And I will conclude to say that, like this morning, I read in the newspapers the problem between Ethiopia and Somalia, and this was being resolved by Turkey. The mediator is Turkey. Let us be responsible. Let us be serious. The African Union should be that person doing the mediation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, candidate from Madagascar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our second round. And without any transition, we are going to step into the third round, and we are going to discover the question. Anita, you have the floor.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move into the third round. Once again, if you're just joining us, these questions have been formulated by an independent panel, and the questions will be open and seen only at the beginning of the round, as I'm doing right now. Esteemed candidates, on the topic of reviving Pan-Africanism and countering external influence, Pan-Africanism is declining, and external powers and internal divisions challenge Africa's integration efforts. What specific steps will you take to rekindle the spirit of Pan-Africanism, counter big power politics on the continent, mobilize African countries behind a common integration agenda, ensure resource self-reliance, and position regional economic communities at the center of this process?
Chers candidats,
Distinguished candidates, your question is as follows in French.
L'africanisme est en déclin et les puissances extérieures et les divisions internes remettent en cause les efforts d'intégration en Afrique. Quelles mesures spécifiques comptez-vous prendre pour raviver l'esprit du panafricanisme contre la politique des grandes puissances sur le continent, mobiliser les pays africains derrière un programme d'intégration commun, assurer l'autonomie en matière de ressources et positionner également les communautés économiques régionales au centre de ce processus? Et nous allons commencer tout de suite avec le candidat.
And we will start with the candidate of Djibouti to provide his answer. You have 4 minutes. First and foremost, we have to understand that we are living in a world which is multipolarized world. This is a world that is actually multipolarized, and this world would not provide space for a continent or countries that do not have the right economies, the military strength, the capacity that is required, and mostly that continent or country that is not on the world stage. This is a reality. So what can we do? What should we do? I think it is very important that the Global South should actually take action. And in the Global South, it is Africa that actually has to stand out. And how is Africa going to stand out? If we do not represent much in terms of global trade, you cannot actually sit around a table where decisions are being taken for the destiny of the world. And so integration is, I would say, an obligation is a must. When we talk about obligation, it is important that the AFCFTA should actually be functional. It is important that intra-Africa trade be developed, and it should go beyond 18%. It is important that African countries should actually use their own resources. And so Africa has now a seat and the G20 table. We want to congratulate South Africa for chairing the G20 next year. And so it is important that the African Union Commission should be working hand in hand with the African Union to actually make sure that Agenda 2063 is a priority item on the agenda of Agenda 2063 of the G20. Africa has to be also on the UN Security Council. Just imagine 80% of the issues discussed at the UN Security Council is African problems. When we talk about security issues, who do we talk about? Africa. We have, when we talk about food insecurity, we also hear Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia. They have actually been victims of natural disasters, but we are not the ones polluting the world. So the African Union should also be fully involved in the COP discussions. The COP discussions should also be held here in Africa. So a strong Africa has to be an Africa that is present on the global stage. We have to see that Africa has to be part and parcel of the global south, and this is what we have to do. And I'm going to make sure that our commission is going to work to ensure that Africa is part of the global south. Integration is a long-winded effort. It goes through solidarity. We are not working among ourselves. We are not speaking to one another as neighbors. We'd rather trade with non-African countries because we have non-tariff barriers, because our currencies are not convertible. Our currencies are not convertible. If I want to trade in birr with Ethiopia and Ethiopia wants to trade in francs, definitely there is loss of money. So we should have a payment and compensation system in Africa. We have to mobilize resources between 5 and 10 billion so that this compensation system